All right, let's dive right in. We're going back to the very beginning of an idea that completely changed the world of finance. We're talking about the moment a new kind of money was born, not in a government mint, but on the internet.
It seems like such a simple question, right? In a world where we can send information anywhere, instantly, why is sending value so complicated? Well, the answer gets to the very heart of a problem that stumped computer scientists for decades.
Just think about it for a second. When you hand someone a dollar bill, that's it. The transaction is instant, it's final, and you don't need to ask anyone for permission. But online, well, you're not actually sending money. You're sending a message, a request to a bank, asking them to please update their records. You see, you're relying on a middleman, and that middleman adds costs, makes things reversible, and builds the entire system on a foundation of trust.
And this total reliance on trust, this need for a third party to sit in the middle of everything, that was the fundamental roadblock. It was the great hurdle that stood in the way of creating a true native currency for the internet.
Back in 2008, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, someone known only as Satoshi Nakamoto, laid this problem out perfectly. Because we have these trusted middlemen, transactions can always be reversed. This means sellers have to be constantly wary of their customers, and everyone just kind of accepts that a certain amount of fraud is an unavoidable cost of doing business.
But here's the thing. Nakamoto didn't just point out the problem. Out of the blue, this anonymous 9-page paper just appeared on a small cryptography mailing list. And inside, it proposed a solution so radical it would change how we think about money forever. That paper laid out a vision for a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The goal wasn't just to get rid of the middleman. The goal was to replace the very need for one with pure, verifiable mathematics.
So this is the absolute key. Take the bank, take the credit card company, and replace them. Not with another company, but with cryptographic proof. Proof instead of trust. That was the game-changing idea.
But, okay, to actually pull this off, Satoshi had to solve this massive problem that had stumped the smartest people in cryptography for years, a problem that sits at the very core of digital money.
Think about it like this. If you can copy and paste an MP3 file a million times, what stops you from copying and pasting a digital dollar and spending it over and over again? Without a central bank watching every transaction, how do you stop infinite counterfeiting? That is the double spending problem. Satoshi's first move was brilliant. They just redefined what a coin even is. It's not a file you can copy, no. Instead, a coin is a continuous chain of ownership. It's a public history of every single time it's been spent, where each new owner uses their unique digital key to sign it over to the next person. So that chain of signatures proves who owns a coin. But to stop them from spending it twice, every single transaction is shouted out to the entire network. They get bundled together into these groups we call blocks, and then those blocks are chained together, one after the other, creating this permanent public record. Each block is sealed with something called a cryptographic hash. Think of it like a unique digital fingerprint. If you change one tiny detail, the whole fingerprint changes. And that is the blockchain. Okay, so how does this global network of strangers agree on the official history of who paid whom without a boss in charge? Well, it's a competition. All the computers on the network, we call them nodes, are racing to solve a really hard math problem. And the first one to find the solution gets to add the next block of transactions to the chain.
And this is the final genius piece of the puzzle. Proof of work. In a network spread across the whole world, how do you know which version of the ledger to trust? Simple. You trust the longest one. And why? Because making the longest chain takes the most computing power. It's proof that the majority of the network's horsepower agrees on this version of history. It completely replaces trust in a person or a company with trust in computational work. It's security through one CPU, one vote. And it was the first time a decentralized network could ever agree on anything.
So let's just pause for a second. The technology here is an absolute breakthrough. It solved the double spending problem without needing a bank or any central authority. It actually created digital scarcity for the first time. But just because you invent some revolutionary tech, does that automatically mean you've created a new form of money? Well, that's a whole different question, and it's one that takes us from computer science into the world of economics. So to dig into that, we're going to turn from Satoshi's original 2008 paper, to a 2014 economic analysis from Durham University. They looked back at Bitcoin's early years and asked this exact question. And what they found is actually pretty nuanced. The paper argues that, yeah, you can absolutely use Bitcoin to buy stuff. That makes it a medium of exchange, but that it doesn't quite meet the formal economic definition of money, at least not yet.
The key ingredient that's missing, according to this analysis, is something called general acceptance. Here's the real test. When you see a price in Bitcoin, do you instantly know if it's a good deal? Or do you have to mentally convert it back to dollars or euros in your head? That little step, that need for translation, shows it hasn't become how we actually measure value. So if it's not quite money, then what is it? And what does the future have in store for it?
Well, the economic analysis is super clear about the upside. The protocol itself is a massive technological breakthrough. It has the potential to totally revolutionize how we send money across borders, disrupting the huge remittance industry, and maybe even create a new kind of global payment system. But on the flip side, it also points out some really big hurdles. Governments are still trying to figure out what to do with it. For the average person, let's be honest, it can still be pretty complicated and risky to use. And the core rules of the system are designed to be really hard to change, which is great for security, but not so great for adapting over time.
And that's really where we land, regardless of whether Bitcoin itself ever becomes global money. The idea it unleashed is now out there in the world. The idea that you can have a system for transferring value that is peer-to-peer, that can't be censored, and that exists completely outside the control of any single company or government, well, that is a question we are all going to be grappling with for decades to come.